Good morning, students. Today we're going to introduce Unit 10, the power of electricity, and work on some grammar and spelling pages. For this lesson, you are going to need your benchmark book, The Power of Electricity, your work packet that you got in your envelope, a pencil, and if you have one, a highlighter, but that is your choice. It's optional. If you don't have one, that's okay. And a notebook or a piece of paper to write down your assignments when we are finished with this video. So the power of electricity doesn't just mean actual electricity or power. It also means the importance of electricity. So let's think about it. What do you use electricity for in your everyday life? Well, we're using it right now. Either you have your Chromebook or computer plugged into the wall, or you have it charged, and in order to charge it, you need electricity. If you didn't have these computers or Chromebooks, then we would not be meeting in this lesson right now, and you would really be doing everything on your own. So if you look around yourself, you'll see many things that have electricity or that need electricity in order to work. And we really couldn't do without any of these things in our everyday life. So I'd like you to take a minute to look around the room, think about what's in your kitchen, your garage, and just write down at the bottom of your packet a few things that require electricity. So we'll pause for a minute while you have a chance to do that. Okay, so if you looked around the room you're in, you probably saw lights plugged in, or you saw electrical switches on the wall. You may have your air conditioner running, that requires electricity, your phone, your DVD, your TV, all your appliances that your parents use to cook, clean, and run your house. Even your car requires electricity. Not just electric cars, but all cars have a battery, which from time to time will run out of charge and either need to be jump-started from somebody else's battery, which has stored electricity, or you may have to replace your battery that comes from the factory, and then you will need electricity from that too. So it is definitely important. And when we don't have electricity, the question is, what do we do then? So today we're going to be reading the first selection in our benchmark book called Power Restored in India. Everyone, go ahead and turn your books to pages 4 and 5. And I'm pretty much going to be combining 2 days worth of lessons in one right here. We had switched to reading the selection on the first day and circling unfamiliar words. And then the second day, rereading and doing key ideas. And we're going to be doing both in this lesson right here. Okay, so here's our main selection. I would like you to follow along with your pencil as I'm reading aloud. We're going to circle unfamiliar words that you do not know, and I'm going to model that in the first paragraph. After that, when I finish reading the rest of the selection, you will circle your own unfamiliar words, and we will go over them in the second reading. This is written as a newspaper article. That's why it looks like a newspaper page. And the date of this is August 1st, 2012. Power Restored in India by Abby Lieberman. Power is back up and running after massive blackouts leave millions in the dark. After experiencing the largest power blackout in history, people in India can finally turn on the lights. On July 30th, India's northern electric grid failed. It left 370 million people without power. By the next day, that number had grown to 620 million. The electrical blackout had spread to more than half the country. The specific cause of the outages is unknown. As of August 1st, power had been restored throughout India. Now, continue to follow along and circle your own unfamiliar words, and we will check what you have found at the end of page 5. Moving on to paragraph 2. The blackout stranded passengers at railway stations. In factories and offices, work ground to a halt. Miners were trapped in a coal mine in West Bengal. In New Delhi, India's capital, traffic snarled when traffic lights stopped working. And the caption on the picture below reads, "During the blackout in New Delhi, trains stopped running." I would assume from that the trains ran on electricity. Next page, paragraph 3. What happened? The failure of 3 national power grids plunged half the country into darkness. An electric grid is a network of power stations, fuel, and power lines that work together to deliver electricity. A failure in any part of the network can cause the power to go out. The exact cause of the grid failures is unknown. Officials believe that the outage was due to areas consuming too much energy, as India's power division struggled to meet the increasing demand for energy. The grids were unable to produce the amount of energy that residents were using. If they overdraw, this is the result, said India's power minister, Veerappa Moily. India is the world's second most populous nation. It is also a growing economic force. Power shortages are not uncommon in the country. Now, many are wondering whether the country needs to work harder to improve its infrastructure or basic facilities. According to the Associated Press, Moily said that the government would not allow a massive blackout to happen again. And the caption on the final picture reads, "A barber cuts his customer's hair by candlelight." Okay, now follow along as I reread, and as I'm reading, I will explain the circled words by looking for context clues, and I'm going to highlight what I find in context clues if I have a highlighter. If you don't have a highlighter, you can just underline the context clues that I found. And if we don't see context clues, then I'll just explain the word and I'll write it in the margin. Okay, so after experiencing the largest power blackout, blackout I thought might be an unfamiliar word, so I circled it. And I'm not seeing any context clues, so I'm just going to tell you that a blackout is when all power goes out. So annotate that in your book. A blackout is when all power goes out. So in other words, all the lights go out, your refrigerator turns off, your computer turns off unless you have a battery. Pretty much everything is dark or black because the power has gone out. I circled the electric grid, that the electric grid failed. And I found my context clues later on. So if you turn your book over or look at the next page, it says right here, an electric grid is a network of power stations, fuel, and power lines that work together to deliver electricity. So it's the entire system that runs our electrical power. I also circled the word outages. Outages is just another word for blackout. It's literally when power goes out. So annotate that definition of outages right here. Also point it up to blackout because basically they're synonyms. And I'm sure that everyone has experienced a blackout or a power outage at some point in your life. We get them when we have storms, when something happens at the power station, or if something really big happens, then all of the computers at the power station go out and everything is run on computer now. All right, so in paragraph 2, hopefully you have circled some important words or words that you didn't know. This phrase, ground to a halt, might be unfamiliar to you. So let's think about it. If work ground to a halt and we have no electricity, what would that mean? Basically, it means that all work stops. You can't do anything without electricity. Again, especially since many things run on computers. Or if you've been in Mrs. Hogan's room with the lights out, then you know that once the power goes out in Mrs. Hogan's room, you pretty much can't do anything at all because she works in a black hole. I also thought that traffic snarled might be a word you don't know. A snarl is like a tangle. Sometimes we'll say that girls' hair gets snarled or tangled, so it gets in knots if they have really long hair. You can have yarn be snarled or string. In this case, the traffic snarled or tangled up so none of the cars could drive. In paragraph 3, once we figured out what electric grid is, I think pretty much all the words in that paragraph might be easy to understand. How about paragraph 4? India's power division struggled to meet the increasing demand for energy. I'm thinking that the power division is the power company. Down in Turlock, you have TID, that's your power company. Up here in Manteca, where I am, I have PG&E. The power division is the group responsible for running the power. I also circled overdraw in my own book. To draw, in this case, does not mean to draw a picture. It means to pull energy. And if you overdraw, I have to put a caret in here, you pull too much energy. Lastly, paragraph 5, some vocabulary. Let's see if we can get some better lighting here. I think it was better before. The first sentence reads, India is the world's second most populous nation. Populous means the number of people. You may have heard the word population. Those are in a word, family. Has to do with the number of people. Just to let you know, in the year of 2012, India had 1.22 billion people. 1,266,000,000 people. To compare, the United States only has had 314 million. That's 1/4 of the population of India. And if you want to look up a world map, you can see that the size of India is a pretty small country compared to the United States. So 4 times as many people in India is a lot of people. This number I will tell you about later on. Okay. Infrastructure. It's definitely a big word. Fortunately for us, the definition is right after that. It's infrastructure or basic facilities. Power is part of a country's infrastructure. Police, fire, emergency vehicles, those are all part of our basic facilities. Schools are part of a country's infrastructure. So is government. Pretty much everything that makes the country run is infrastructure. And even though India is the world's second most populous nation, has a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily have as much infrastructure as the United States. The United States is one of the most advanced countries in the world. So that's why power failures like this, great big ones, happen in countries like India rather than in the United States. Okay, now let's talk about our purpose for reading. Our purpose for reading was to read to learn about a power outage that occurred in India in 2012, and then to underline key details. The reason we're going to underline key details is that later for homework, you are going to be writing a summary of the key details. So I'm going to model on paragraphs 1 and 2, and then I will tell you about your assignment for paragraphs 3, 4, and 5. When I read and reread paragraph 1, the key detail, the main idea that this whole article is about, goes with the title, Power Restored in India. The key detail is that the largest power blackout in history happened in India. It happened on July 30th, and it lasted until August 1st. So what I'm going to annotate in the margin is that in 2012, the largest power outage was for 3 days in India. So while you annotate that, copy that down. Again, you can be imagining 3 whole days with no lights, no TV, no video games. You don't want to open your refrigerator because then you let the cold out and all your food will spoil. And after 3 days, probably your food is spoiling whether you open your refrigerator or not. All the street lights go out. All of the lights that let the cars go. The picture shows that the trains didn't go. Even miners trapped in a coal mine in West Bengal. which is a part of India. Now looking at paragraph 2, those are all little details that go with the key detail of the power outage. It's examples. They're good examples. They add to what we're learning about, but they're not key details. So this is the only key detail for paragraphs 1 and 2. Now, your assignment, when we're done with this video, is that you are going to read these 3 paragraphs and underline a key detail in each one. Let's look now at your packet. The directions say to read Power Restored in India and annotate key details that tell about the power outage. Then complete the chart with the key details and a summary. Now, if you want to write your key details in the margin and use this area for your summary, you can. The area for the summary is pretty short, but then again, your summary should be very short. You should not be copying word for word. You should be summarizing the important details. I have started the first sentence for you. You can always rewind the video later to write it down. I've started with the largest power blackout in history was in India in 2012. I only have a line and 2/3 to write 1 or 2 short sentences that summarize paragraphs 3, 4, and 5. Also, if your book doesn't have a big black bar across the question, you can go ahead and answer the question. We'll discuss that later too. If it's covered up, don't worry about it. We'll go over it really quickly when we have our question and answer later in our Zoom meeting. So, for homework, first thing that you can write down is page 1. Underline or highlight 1 key detail in each paragraph. Finish the summary. ELL students that are meeting with Mrs. Stewart, try to finish that by 11:30 because then you're going to go over it with her. If you don't have time because you watch this video later in the morning, that's okay. Just so you know, in the future, when she is going to be